The morning mist clung to the grass airfield at Rechlin as Ernst Udet climbed into the cockpit of the sleek new prototype. It was 1,935, and the future of German air power was about to take shape in ways that would soon shake the world. The aircraft beneath him represented more than just aluminum and steel. It embodied the rebirth of German military aviation from the ashes of Versailles. The story of the Luftwaffe's aircraft begins not with Hitler's rise to power, but in the clandestine planning rooms of the 1,922nd. Even before the Nazi Party gained control, German aviation companies had been secretly developing military designs under the guise of civilian projects. When Hermann Göring established the Reich Air Ministry on the 30th of May 1933, he merely brought these shadow operations into the light. The ministry's creation marked the formal separation of German aviation from civilian oversight, integrating both civil and military development under one ambitious umbrella. At the heart of this transformation stood three major manufacturers whose names would become synonymous with German air power: Messerschmitt, Heinkel, and Junkers. Each company brought its own philosophy to aircraft design, creating a competitive environment that would produce some of the war's most innovative machines. Ernst Heinkel, already established as one of Germany's most experienced aviation pioneers, had been producing aircraft that skirted the edge of military capability. His company's work on the He-51 biplane fighter seemed modest, but hidden in Heinkel's design offices were plans for something far more revolutionary. The year 1933 marked a crucial turning point. Hermann Göring sent out seemingly innocuous letters requesting designs for a high-speed courier aircraft, a transparent cover for what would become the Luftwaffe's next generation of fighters. The Günther brothers, Walter and Siegfried, working at Heinkel, began their work on Project 1,015 inches, late 1,933. Their design philosophy drew inspiration from their earlier He-70 Blitz, itself influenced by the American Lockheed Model 9 Orion. This would eventually become the He-112, Heinkel's entry into the fighter competition that would define the Luftwaffe's future. Meanwhile, in Bavaria, a young designer named Willy Messerschmitt faced his own challenges. His company, Bayerische Flugzeugwerke, had emerged from bankruptcy in 1931, saved only by Messerschmitt's political connections and innovative design philosophy. Messerschmitt promoted what he called lightweight construction, where multiple load-bearing parts were merged into single reinforced structures, saving weight while maintaining strength. This concept first proved itself in the Bf-108 Typhoon sports aircraft, which began setting records almost immediately after its introduction. The competition for the Luftwaffe's new fighter commenced in earnest in May 1934. Four companies, Arado, Bayerische Flugzeugwerke, soon to be Messerschmitt, Focke-Wulf, and Heinkel received contracts to develop prototypes. The specifications demanded an all-metal monoplane capable of 400 kilometers per hour at 6,000 meters, armed with at least 3 machine guns or one 20mm cannon. By spring 1935, the prototypes were ready for evaluation. The Heinkel He-112 showed promise with its sophisticated design and excellent handling characteristics. Its prototype first flew in September 1935, demonstrating capabilities that impressed many observers. However, fate intervened in the form of politics and personality clashes. Erhard Milch, head of the Reich Aviation Ministry's technical division, harbored a deep personal hatred for Messerschmitt, stemming from the crash of a Messerschmitt M20 that killed Milch's close friend. Despite this animosity, Messerschmitt's Bf-109 proved superior in the trials, particularly in its rate of climb and high-altitude performance. The selection of the Bf-109 over the He-112 would prove to be one of the most consequential decisions in aviation history. While only around 100 He-112 seconds were ever completed, the Bf-109 would go on to become the most produced fighter aircraft in history, with over 33,000 units built. The aircraft's success stemmed from its innovative features: an all-metal monocoque construction, a closed canopy, and retractable landing gear revolutionary for its time. Parallel to the fighter development, Germany's bomber force was taking shape. Junkers, with its extensive experience in all-metal aircraft construction, received substantial contracts. The Ju-87 Stuka dive bomber emerged from this period, its development beginning in 1934 under Hermann Pohlmann's leadership. The Stuka's design philosophy diverged sharply from conventional wisdom. Pohlmann believed that any dive bomber needed to be simple and robust, leading to distinctive features like fixed landing gear with characteristic spats, eschewing retractable gear for simplicity and ease of maintenance. The Ju-87's development faced its own challenges. The first prototype crashed in January 1936, killing the test crew and forcing a complete redesign of the tail section. Originally featuring twin fins, the aircraft was modified to incorporate a single, large vertical stabilizer. Despite these setbacks, the Stuka's potential for precision bombing captured the imagination of Luftwaffe leadership, particularly Ernst Ude, who had become an enthusiastic advocate of dive bombing after witnessing American Curtiss Hawk demonstrations. By 1936, German aircraft production was accelerating at an unprecedented pace. The state constructed new factories, including Heinkel's massive facility at Oranienburg, which began operation in May 1937. These weren't just assembly lines. They were temples to German engineering prowess, employing thousands of workers in facilities that belonged to the state, but bore the names of their famous designers. The Spanish Civil War, beginning in July 1936, provided the perfect testing ground for these new aircraft. The Condor Legion, Germany's volunteer force supporting Franco's nationalists, received the latest equipment straight from German production lines. 3. He, 111 bombers, and 3 Ju-87 Amperes dive bombers arrived in Spain by late 1936, where they would prove their concepts in actual combat conditions. The He-111, initially disguised as a civilian transport, demonstrated its dual-use design philosophy perfectly. With its glazed nose and streamlined fuselage, it could pose as the world's fastest passenger aircraft while secretly serving as a bomber capable of delivering devastating payloads. The combat experience in Spain proved invaluable. The Luftwaffe learned that speed and maneuverability were often more important than heavy defensive armament. The He-51 biplanes initially sent to Spain proved woefully inadequate against Soviet-supplied Republican fighters, reinforcing the need for modern monoplane designs. This real-world validation accelerated the Bf-109's development and production, with improved variants incorporating lessons learned from combat. As 1,939 approached, the Luftwaffe's aircraft inventory had transformed from a collection of secretly developed prototypes into a formidable force. Production figures tell the story. From approximately 8,300 aircraft in 1939, German factories were gearing up for massive expansion. The Bf-109 production lines were running at full capacity, with over 2,700 units produced annually by 1941. The Ju-87 Stuka production reached 60 units per month, while Heinkel's various facilities produced both the He-111 bomber and other designs at an impressive rate. The 1st of September 1939 dawned gray and ominous over the German-Polish border. At 4:45 a.m., the Luftwaffe struck with coordinated precision across multiple targets. Among the first aircraft over Polish soil were Ju-87 Stukas from Sturzkampfgeschwader 1, their distinctive gull wings cutting through the morning mist toward the town of Wailun. This attack, occurring even before the official declaration of war, would demonstrate the terrifying effectiveness of German air power. Within just over an hour, 75% of Wailun lay in ruins, with more than 1,200 civilians dead, a grim preview of the devastation to come. The Polish campaign showcased the Luftwaffe's revolutionary tactical doctrine, close coordination between air and ground forces in what would become known as Blitzkrieg. The numbers were overwhelming: 705 Heinkel, He 111 seconds and 533. Dornier Du 17 seconds formed the backbone of the bomber force, while the new Ju 88 seconds, though only about 50 had reached operational units by September 1939, added their speed and versatility to the assault. The Bf 109 seconds dominated the skies, quickly establishing air superiority against the brave but outmatched Polish Air Force. The Stuka became the symbol of this new warfare. Its psychological impact exceeded even its considerable physical destruction. The infamous Jericho trumpet sirens, mounted on the landing gear legs, created a terrifying wail during diving attacks that panicked both military and civilian targets. Pilots like Hans-Ulrich Rudel began their legendary careers here, perfecting techniques that would make the Stuka one of the most feared weapons in the German arsenal. The aircraft's automatic pullout system, activated after bomb release at around 450 meters, prevented pilots from blacking out due to high G-forces, a revolutionary safety feature that allowed aggressive diving attacks. However, the campaign also revealed weaknesses. Some 261 German aircraft were destroyed, and 279 damaged during the Polish campaign losses. That seemed acceptable given the swift victory, but hinted at vulnerabilities that would become critical later. The Ju-88, despite its impressive specifications, proved challenging for inexperienced crews. Reports surfaced of pilots more afraid of their own aircraft than the enemy, with several requesting transfers to the more familiar He 111 units. This high-performance bomber required extensive training to master, a luxury the rapidly expanding Luftwaffe could not always afford. The winter of 1939-40, known as the Phony War, provided a crucial respite for addressing these issues. German aircraft manufacturers used this time to incorporate combat lessons into improved designs. The Bf-109E Emil series emerged with strengthened airframes and improved armament, including the option for 20mm MGFF cannons. The Ju-87B series received the more powerful Jumo 211D engine, increasing performance and bomb load capacity. Most significantly, the Ju-88 Ampères 5 addressed many of the original model's deficiencies with extended wingspan and improved handling characteristics. Spring 1940 brought the Luftwaffe's greatest triumph. The invasion of France and the Low Countries demonstrated mature Blitzkrieg tactics with devastating effectiveness. On the 10th of May 1940, German aircraft struck simultaneously across multiple countries. The numbers involved were staggering. Approximately 1,300 bombers, 1,200 fighters, 500 transport aircraft, and 500 gliders participated in the initial assault. The Luftwaffe's tactical innovations proved decisive, using glider-borne troops to capture Belgian fortresses, paratroops to seize Dutch airfields, and concentrated Stuka attacks to blast holes in Allied defensive lines. The campaign introduced new aircraft to combat. The Focke-Wulf W190 was still in development, but Kurt Tank's design philosophy was already taking shape. He envisioned not a racehorse like the Bf-109, but a Dienstpferd, a cavalry horse that could operate from rough frontline airfields, be maintained by briefly trained personnel, and absorb significant battle damage while remaining operational. Though the FW-190 wouldn't see combat until August 1941, its development during this period represented German recognition that different combat conditions required different solutions. The He 111 proved its worth as the Luftwaffe's primary horizontal bomber during the French campaign. Flying in characteristic stepped formations called Ketten, these bombers delivered devastating attacks on Allied airfields, rail yards, and troop concentrations. The aircraft's robust construction allowed it to absorb significant punishment. Numerous accounts describe He 111 seconds returning to base with massive damage that would have downed lesser aircraft. The glazed nose section, while vulnerable to fighter attack, provided excellent visibility for precision bombing in good weather conditions. The fall of France seemed to validate every aspect of German air doctrine. The Luftwaffe had achieved its objectives with relatively modest losses while destroying much of the Allied air forces. The Bf-109 had proven superior to most Allied fighters, particularly the French Morane-Saulnier MS 406, and even holding its own against the British Hurricane in the limited engagements over France. The Stuka had terrorized retreating Allied columns, its sirens becoming the soundtrack to defeat for thousands of fleeing soldiers and refugees. Yet even in victory, perceptive observers noticed concerning trends. The Luftwaffe was essentially a tactical air force designed to support ground operations rather than conduct independent strategic campaigns. Its bombers, even the modern Ju-88, lacked the range and payload of true strategic bombers. The absence of a four-engine heavy bomber, a gap that would never be adequately filled, reflected fundamental misconceptions about air warfare that would soon be exposed over Britain. The English Channel stretched before the assembled might of the Luftwaffe in July 1940, a mere 21 miles of water that might as well have been an ocean. For the first time, German air power would operate independently, without supporting ground forces, in a campaign that would determine the course of the war. The aircraft that had terrorized Europe now faced their greatest challenge: the world's first integrated air defense system and the determined pilots of the Royal Air Force. Operation Adlertag, Eagle Day, on the 13th of August 1940, began with confused communications and partial attacks, a harbinger of problems to come. The Luftwaffe's bomber force primarily, he 111 seconds, Do 17 seconds, and the newer Ju-88 seconds found themselves operating at the extreme edge of their range. More critically, their escorts, the vaunted Bf 109 seconds, had only 10 to 15 minutes of combat time over London before fuel concerns forced their return. This fundamental limitation would shape the entire battle. The Ju-87 Stuka, terror weapon of the Blitzkrieg, quickly proved catastrophically vulnerable to modern fighter opposition. On August 16, Sturzkampfgeschwader 1 and 2 lost 9 aircraft during a raid on RAF Tangmere. 2 days later, during what became known as the hardest day, Sturzkampfgeschwader 77 lost 17 Ju 87 seconds attacking RAF Ford and Thorney Island. The slow, lumbering dive bombers, flying at a cruising speed of only 160 miles per hour, were easy prey for Hurricanes and Spitfires. Their Bf 109 escorts, forced to fly at lower altitudes and slower speeds to protect them, surrendered their greatest advantages, height and speed. The Bf 109's limitations became increasingly apparent as the battle progressed. Despite its excellent high-altitude performance and superior rate of climb, the aircraft's short range remained its Achilles heel. Pilots reported having to break off successful engagements due to fuel warnings. The stress of constantly monitoring fuel gauges while engaged in life-or-death combat took its toll. Many German pilots were forced to ditch in the Channel or became prisoners of war after running out of fuel over England experienced aircrew the Luftwaffe could ill afford to lose. The introduction of the Bf 109 E4 divided by N in late summer 1940, with its improved DB 601 Newtons engine, provided marginal improvements but couldn't overcome the fundamental range problem. Some units experimented with drop tanks, but these had to be jettisoned before combat, negating their benefit once fighting began. The psychological pressure on German pilots was immense over enemy territory. With deteriorating weather and minimal fuel reserves, every minute in combat brought them closer to death or capture. The bomber force faced its own challenges. The He 111 workhorse of the Luftwaffe bomber arm proved surprisingly resilient, but suffered from weak defensive armament. The characteristic glazed nose, while providing excellent visibility, offered little protection to the crew. Pilot accounts describe the terror of head-on attacks by RAF fighters, the thin plexiglass offering no protection against 8 machine guns converging on the cockpit. Losses mounted steadily by the end of October, 1,940. The Luftwaffe had lost 1,733 aircraft, with many more damaged. The Ju-88 performed better than its contemporaries, its speed, allowing it to evade some fighter interceptions. However, the aircraft's complexity continued to cause problems. In the chaos of combat, with damaged engines and hydraulics, the sophisticated systems that made the Ju-88 advanced also made it vulnerable. Crews reported difficulty maintaining formation with battle damage that older, simpler designs might have sustained. The high landing speed, already challenging for experienced pilots, became potentially fatal when combined with combat damage and crew injuries. German technical innovation attempted to address these tactical disadvantages. The X-Gerät X apparatus radio navigation system allowed bombers to find targets in darkness or poor weather. following intersecting radio beams transmitted from stations in occupied Europe, specially equipped. He 111 seconds could navigate with remarkable accuracy for the era. The British called this system Wotan I, after the one-eyed Norse god, and developed countermeasures codenamed Bromide to jam the signals. This began an electronic warfare battle that would continue throughout the war. As autumn progressed into winter, the Luftwaffe shifted to night bombing the Blitz. This transition revealed both adaptability and fundamental limitations in German aircraft design. The He-111 and Ju-88 could operate effectively at night, but they lacked the payload to deliver truly strategic damage. Where British and American planners envisioned 1,000-bomber raids, delivering devastating tonnage, the Luftwaffe could only mount harassment attacks, terrible for civilians but insufficient to cripple British war production. The failure over Britain exposed critical flaws in German aircraft development philosophy. The obsession with dive-bombing capability had compromised designs across the board. The He-177 Greif, Germany's attempt at a four-engine heavy bomber, suffered from numerous technical problems, many stemming from the requirement that it be capable of dive bombing an absurd demand for such a large aircraft. Its coupled engines, designed to maintain a streamlined appearance, proved prone to catastrophic fires. The few He-177 seconds that entered service earned the grim nickname Luftwaffenfeuerzug, Luftwaffe's lighter, from their crews. Dawn on the 22nd of June 1941 found the Luftwaffe positioned along a front stretching from the Baltic to the Black Sea. Operation Barbarossa would dwarf all previous campaigns, requiring every available aircraft in the German inventory. The initial strikes targeted Soviet airfields with devastating precision by noon of the first day. The Luftwaffe claimed 1,489 Soviet aircraft destroyed, mostly on the ground. The Bf-109 Farads, the latest Friedrich variant with its improved DB 601 Newtons engine and refined aerodynamics, ruled the skies against obsolete Soviet fighters. The Eastern Front revealed the Fly 190's combat debut in November 1942, though it had already proven itself in the West. This radical design, with its BMW 801 air-cooled radial engine, offered advantages the Bf-109 couldn't match. The wide-track landing gear made it stable on the primitive Russian airfields, while the radial engine proved more resistant to battle damage than the liquid-cooled power plants of the Bf-109. Soviet pilots nicknamed it the Butcher for its devastating firepower, typically 2 MG-17 machine guns in the cowling and 4 MG-150, 1 over 20 millimeters cannons in the wings. The Stuka found renewed life on the Eastern Front. Here, without effective fighter opposition initially, it could operate as designed. Hans Ulrich Rudel emerged as the weapon's greatest exponent, eventually flying 2,530 combat missions and destroying 519 tanks, 1 battleship, 1 cruiser, 1 destroyer, and 70 landing craft. His specially modified Ju-87G1, armed with 2 37mm BK 3.7 cannons in underwing pods, became the ultimate tank killer. Each cannon pod weighed 363 kilograms, significantly affecting the aircraft's already modest performance, but the tungsten core rounds could penetrate the armor of any Soviet tank when striking from above and behind. The vast distances of Russia exposed every limitation in German aircraft design. The Bf-109's short range, manageable over the English Channel, became critical when operating over the endless steppes. Pilots frequently found themselves forced to land at alternative airfields or crash land when fuel ran out. The primitive conditions, mud in spring and autumn, dust in summer, Arctic cold in winter, tested aircraft and crews beyond anything experienced in Western Europe. Ground crews performed miracles keeping aircraft operational, often working in temperatures of -40 degrees Celsius, where touching bare metal meant leaving skin behind. The Ju-88 proved its versatility in Russia, serving not just as a bomber, but increasingly as a night fighter, reconnaissance platform, and ground attack aircraft. The Ju-88C heavy fighter variant, with a solid nose packed with cannons, proved particularly effective against Soviet bombers and transport aircraft. The type's speed and range made it ideal for interdiction missions deep behind Soviet lines, hunting the supply trains that kept the Red Army fighting. As 1,942 progressed, the qualitative advantage of German aircraft began to erode. The Soviets introduced competitive fighters like the Yakovlev Yak-9 and Lavochkin La-5, while Lend-Lease brought American P-39 Airacobras and British Hurricanes. More significantly, Soviet production, relocated beyond the Urals, began to dwarf German output. Where German factories produced perhaps 1,000 fighters monthly, Soviet production exceeded 2,000, with simpler designs that could be maintained under primitive conditions. The FW-190 units on the Eastern Front adapted their tactics to these new realities. JG-54, flying FWA 190 seconds, claimed 71 victories in December 1943. For the loss of 14 aircraft, an impressive ratio but unsustainable given the numerical disparities. The aircraft's superior roll rate and devastating firepower made it deadly in the hands of experienced pilots, but those experienced pilots became increasingly rare as the war dragged on. German technical innovation continued despite the deteriorating situation. The FW-190 Farad series, optimized for ground attack with additional armor and bomb racks, entered service in 1943. These Schlachtflugzeug battle aircraft proved highly effective against Soviet armor when equipped with rockets or bombs, but required fighter escort to survive. The irony was inescapable. Germany needed fighters to protect ground attack aircraft that existed because there weren't enough tanks to stop the Soviet advance. By early 1943, the Luftwaffe faced an unprecedented crisis. American B-17 Flying Fortresses and B-24 Liberators appeared over Germany in ever-increasing numbers, while at night, RAF Bomber Command's Lancasters and Halifaxes delivered devastating area attacks. The aircraft designed for tactical support now had to defend the homeland against strategic bombing on an industrial scale. The transformation required would test every aspect of German aviation technology and doctrine. The daylight bomber formations presented a unique challenge. Flying in combat boxes with interlocking fields of fire, each B-17 carried 13 50 caliber machine guns. Conventional fighter attacks proved costly. The Bf-109 G6 standard fighter variant by 1943 struggled to carry enough firepower to quickly destroy a 4-engine bomber. The addition of underwing gondolas containing 20mm cannons degraded performance significantly, making the fighters vulnerable to American P-47 Thunderbolt escorts that began appearing in increasing numbers. German designers responded with specialized bomber destroyers. The FW-190 Ampere 6 introduced reinforced wings to carry additional weapons, while the A6/R1 variant added 2 more 20mm cannons in underwing pods. The ultimate expression came with the Sturmbach, battering ram. Variants Fu 190 Amperes, 8/R2S, with additional armor plating and 30mm Mk 108 cannons. These aircraft could destroy a B-17 with just 3 or 4 hits, but their added weight made them sitting ducks for Allied escort fighters. The Luftwaffe developed new tactics to maximize their bomber-destroyers' effectiveness. The Sturm Group concept employed heavily armed and armored Fu 190 seconds, approaching bomber formations from behind in tight formation, protected by Fu 109 seconds optimized for fighter combat. Pilots wore distinctive whites of the eyes, patches 2 white crescents signifying their commitment to press attacks to point-blank range. The first Sturm Group missions in July 1944 proved devastating, but losses among the attacking fighters remained severe. Night fighting evolved into a deadly technological chess match. The Ju-88C and R-series night fighters, equipped with Liechtenstein radar sets, hunted RAF bombers in the darkness. The characteristic antler antenna arrays created drag and reduced speed by 25-30 miles per hour, but allowed interception in total darkness. German night fighter aces like Heinz Wolfgang Schnaufer, who claimed 121 victories, developed sophisticated tactics, using the bomber's own fires to silhouette other targets. The British responded with window strips of aluminum foil that confused German radar, first used during the Hamburg raids of July 1943. German scientists quickly developed new radar frequencies and tactics, but each measure brought a countermeasure. The installation of schräge Musik, jazz music, upward-firing cannons in night fighters allowed attacks from below, in the bomber's blind spot. A Ju-88 or Bf-110 night fighter would slide beneath an unsuspecting Lancaster, align itself between the bomber's engines, and fire a brief burst into the wing fuel tanks. Many RAF crews never knew what hit them. The appearance of American long-range escort fighters fundamentally changed the air war. The P-51 Mustang, with its Packard-built Merlin engine and drop tanks, could escort bombers all the way to Berlin and back. Suddenly, German fighters found themselves outmatched even over their own territory. The Bf-109G, despite continuous upgrades, struggled against the Mustang's combination of speed, range, and maneuverability. The FW-190, excellent at medium altitudes, suffered from decreased performance above 20,000 feet, where most bomber interceptions occurred. Production miracles kept German aircraft coming despite the bombing. Albert Speer's rationalization program increased fighter production from 1,000 monthly in early 1943 to over 3,000 by September 1944. Factories dispersed into forests and caves, while slave labor from concentration camps assembled components in horrific conditions. The numbers seemed impressive, but they mask critical problems, fuel shortages, inadequate pilot training, and the loss of experienced aircrew that couldn't be replaced. The technological race intensified as Germany sought qualitative advantages to offset quantitative inferiority. The Bf-109 Kelvins 4, the ultimate variant of Messerschmitt's famous fighter, featured a DB605D engine with methanol water injection, providing 2,000 horsepower for brief periods. Armed with a 30mm Mk108 cannon firing through the propeller hub and two MG151 over 20 cannons, it represented the absolute limit of the basic design's development potential. In the forest clearings of East Prussia, away from Allied reconnaissance, Germany's secret weapons underwent testing that would revolutionize aviation forever. The Messerschmitt Me 262 Schwalbe, Schwallow, represented not just an evolution but a revolution in fighter design. On the 18th of July 1942, test pilot Fritz Wendell had taken the Me 262 V3 on its first pure jet flight, achieving speeds that seemed impossible to propeller-driven aircraft designers. By late 1944, this aircraft would enter combat, too late to change the war's outcome, but forever changing aviation's future. The Me 262's development path illustrated both German innovation and the dysfunction that hampered its deployment. The design originated in April 1939 as Project 1065, initially conceived around BMW 003 turbojets. When these engines proved unreliable, Junkers Jumo 4 seconds were substituted, but these too suffered from materials shortages. The lack of high-temperature alloys forced the use of inferior steel, limiting engine life to just 25 hours, assuming they didn't fail catastrophically first. Test pilot accounts describe the delicate dance required to start the engines, with ground crew using motorcycle engines to spin the turbines, while pilots carefully managed throttles to prevent flameouts or fires. Adolf Hitler's interference proved particularly damaging. Upon seeing the Me 262 inches November 1943, he immediately demanded its conversion to a bomber. The Blitz bomber, he believed, would repel the anticipated Allied invasion. This decision delayed fighter versions by crucial months, while engineers struggled to adapt the design for bombs it was never meant to carry. When Me 262 Amperes 1, a fighters finally reached operational units in September 1944, they faced overwhelming odds. Yet, when conditions allowed, the Me 262 proved devastating. With a top speed of 540 miles per hour, 100 miles per hour, faster than the best Allied fighters, it could slash through bomber formations with impunity. Its 430mm Mk108 cannons could destroy a B-17 inches seconds. Allied fighter pilots reported frustration at watching Me 262 seconds simply accelerate away from pursuit, untouchable by conventional aircraft. The few operational jets claimed a 5-to-1 kill ratio, though exact figures remain disputed. Parallel to the Me-262, other revolutionary designs emerged from German drawing boards. The Heinkel He-162 Volksjäger, People's Fighter, represented desperation given form a jet fighter designed to be built by semi-skilled labor from non-strategic materials and flown by Hitler Youth with minimal training. First flying on the 6th of December 1944, just 69 days after the contract was signed, it featured a BMW 003 turbojet mounted uniquely above the fuselage. The aircraft proved viciously unstable, killing numerous test pilots and trainees. Of the 116 delivered by war's end, few saw combat. The rocket-powered Messerschmitt Me 163 Comet offered another glimpse of the future while embodying the present's desperation. Powered by a Walter HWK 109 to 509 amperes rocket motor burning highly volatile C-STOF and T-STOF propellants, it could reach 700 miles per hour and climb to 30,000 feet in under 3 minutes. However, its 8-minute powered flight time, dangerous landing characteristics, it jettisoned its wheeled dolly on takeoff and landed on a skid, and tendency to explode if fuel residues mixed made it nearly as dangerous to its pilots as to enemies. JG-400, the only unit equipped with the Comet, claimed just 16 confirmed victories against hundreds of aircraft lost in accidents. Even conventional aircraft received desperate upgrades. The FW-190D9 Dora represented the piston engine fighter's last evolutionary gasp. Fitted with a Junkers Jumo 213 amperes liquid-cooled engine producing 1,776 horsepower, 2,240 with methanol injection, it finally gave the FW-190 the high-altitude performance it had always lacked. Pilots praised its handling and performance, with some considering it superior to the P-51D Mustang. However, by the time significant numbers reached frontline units in late 1944, fuel shortages meant many never flew combat missions. The Ta-152, Kurt Tank's ultimate development of the FW-190, pushed piston engine fighter performance to its absolute limits. The Ta-152 hours, with its extended wings spanning 14.5 meters and pressurized cockpit, could reach 472 miles per hour at altitude. Armed with one 30mm cannon and two 20mm cannons, it might have been a world beater in 1943. By 1945, with only 67 completed before production ended, it was merely a footnote to defeat. Desperation bred bizarre innovations. The Mistletoe program mated worn-out Ju-88 bombers, packed with explosives, to Bf-109 or Flash-190 fighters, mounted on top. The fighter pilot would guide the combination to the target, aim the unmanned bomber, then separate and return home, while the flying bomb continued to impact. Originally intended for use against Scapa Flow or Soviet power stations, most missiles were expended against bridges over the Oder and Neisse rivers, in futile attempts to slow the Soviet advance. As 1945 dawned, the Luftwaffe existed more on paper than in reality. January's Operation Bodenplatte saw nearly 1,000 aircraft attack Allied airfields in support of the Battle of the Bulge. Achieving tactical surprise, German fighters destroyed numerous Allied aircraft on the ground, but lost 250 of their own machines, many to friendly fire from German anti-aircraft guns not warned of the operation. More critically, they lost irreplaceable pilots. The attack force included instructors and the last trained reserves. JG-2 alone suffered 40% casualties. The final months witnessed surreal contrasts. While Me-262 seconds operated from autobahns to avoid bombed airfields, using ox cart-towed starting carts because no fuel existed for support vehicles, German factories somehow produced 2,700 more aircraft in war's final months. These machines, scattered across hidden forest strips and camouflage dispersal areas, lacked fuel, pilots, or purpose. Many were destroyed by their crews to prevent capture. Others were discovered years later, abandoned in barns and caves. In April 1945, as Soviet forces closed on Berlin, the last Luftwaffe missions flew with tragic futility. Me, 262 seconds from JG-7 attempted ground attacks against Soviet forces. Their advanced jets reduced to the same close support role as Stuka's 5 years earlier. On April 26, Oberst Hans Ulrich Rudel flew his 2,530th and final combat mission, crash landing his Ju-87 after losing a leg to anti-aircraft fire. It was a fitting end. The Luftwaffe's most decorated pilot, flying its most iconic aircraft, defeated not by enemy fighters, but by the grinding attrition of a war Germany could never win. The story of Luftwaffe aircraft in World War II is ultimately one of extraordinary technical achievement undermined by strategic miscalculation, political interference, and industrial limitations. German designers created revolutionary aircraft, the first operational jet fighter, the first rocket fighter, innovations in radar and electronics that would influence aviation for decades. Yet these achievements couldn't overcome fundamental errors. The lack of a strategic bomber force, the failure to develop adequate training programs, the inability to match Allied production capacity, and ultimately, the criminal regime these magnificent machines served. From the secret development of the early 1000, 930 seconds, to the jets of 1000, 945, German aircraft represented both the pinnacle of aeronautical engineering and the futility of technical superiority without strategic wisdom. The Bf-109 that dominated European skies in 1940 and the Me-262 that amazed the world in 1945 were products of the same system, brilliant in conception, flawed in application, and ultimately defeated by the combined industrial might and determination of the Allied powers. The legacy of these aircraft lives on, not in the cause they served, but in the aviation innovations they pioneered and the lessons they teach about the relationship between technology and strategy in modern warfare. The numbers tell the final story. Of approximately 119,000 combat aircraft produced by Germany during World War II, nearly 100,000 were destroyed. Each represented not just aluminum and steel, but human ambition, ingenuity, and ultimately, tragedy. The eagles of the Luftwaffe soared higher and faster than any before them, but in the end, they could not escape the gravity of their nation's doomed cause. Their story remains a testament to human achievement and a warning about its misuse, magnificent machines in service of a terrible purpose. Technological marvels that could not prevent, and indeed accelerated, their creator's destruction